Hello, and welcome to the Sacred Truth Channel. It's a pleasure to have you here. Before we begin, I want to extend an important invitation. Follow the channel and turn on the notification bell, because here we speak truths that many avoid, messages that awaken, and content that can transform your spiritual life. And while you watch, I invite you to reflect deeply, because what we're going to talk about today is not just information. It is confrontation, it is awareness, it is a warning. There is a conflict within every human being that few truly understand. A silent, constant conflict, invisible to the eyes, yet extremely powerful. It is the struggle between what you feel and what is right, between what your heart desires and what your conscience knows should be done, between the impulses of the flesh and spiritual guidance, and the most dangerous part of all. This conflict is often not perceived as a danger, but as something normal, as a natural part of life, as something that doesn't need to be questioned. But the truth is, ignoring this conflict is exactly what makes it so destructive. The desires of the flesh are intense, immediate, and seductive. They speak loudly, promise instant gratification, and offer pleasure without effort and results without process. That's why they are extremely difficult to resist. They require no time, no reflection, no discipline. They simply demand an immediate response, an impulsive decision, a moment of weakness. And when you give in, even if it seems small, insignificant, you are strengthening a pattern, creating a habit, feeding something that over time grows stronger within you. At the same time, the human heart is deeply deceptive. It is not only an emotional guide, it is influenced by experiences, traumas, desires, fears, and illusions. It can make you believe something is right when it is not. It can make you justify wrong decisions, ignore clear signs, and follow paths that seem good at first, but lead to deep consequences. And this is exactly why blindly trusting the heart can be extremely dangerous. And when the desires of the flesh unite with the deception of the heart, a powerful and destructive combination is born. Because you don't just want something, you start to believe it's right. You don't just feel desire, you begin to justify that desire. And this creates a very strong illusion, a sense that you are in control, that you are making conscious decisions, when in reality you are being guided by impulses and emotions that haven't been filtered through truth. And this is the greatest danger, deception that feels like truth. Because when something is clearly wrong, it's easier to resist. But when something seems right, justifiable, acceptable, resistance diminishes. And this is where many people get lost. Not in big decisions, but in small concessions. Not in extreme moments, but in daily choices that shape the path they are following. Over time, these choices begin to have consequences. The person begins to feel emptiness, restlessness, a lack of peace they cannot explain. They begin to realize that, despite following what they feel, something inside them is not right. And this happens because there is a huge difference between what satisfies momentarily and what brings true peace. The desires of the flesh satisfy for a moment, but demand payment later. The heart may justify, but it doesn't sustain, and this payment can come in many forms: regret, frustration, guilt, confusion, because what seemed right at first begins to show its consequences. And often, when the person realizes, they are already caught in difficult patterns, already trapped in habits that have been built over time. But there is something very important that needs to be understood. You are not obliged to follow everything you feel. Not everything you desire should be acted upon. Not everything your heart points to should be followed. There is a difference between feeling and deciding. There is a difference between having desire and acting. And this difference completely defines the course of your life. Spiritual maturity begins when you understand that not everything that comes from within you is trustworthy, that there are desires that need to be controlled, emotions that need to be filtered, impulses that need to be questioned. And this is not repression, it is awareness. It is not limitation, it is direction. Because when you learn not to act automatically based on your desires, you begin to live more intentionally. You begin to make more conscious decisions. You start to build a life aligned with principles, not just momentary feelings. And this changes everything. Because life is not defined only by what you feel, but by what you choose to do with what you feel. And perhaps today you are facing exactly this kind of conflict. Perhaps there is something within you that wants to go one way, but something deeper tells you it's not the right path. Perhaps you're trying to justify decisions, trying to find reasons to follow something that, deep down, you know isn't best for you. And if this is happening, it is already a sign. A sign that there is awareness, a sign that there is still sensitivity, a sign that you can still perceive the difference between impulse and guidance. And this sign should not be ignored, because it is from this that you can begin to change. Change the way you react, change the way you decide, change the way you live. And this change does not happen all at once. It happens in small choices. In moments when you decide not to follow an impulse, in situations where you choose to think before acting, in decisions where you prioritize what is right, even if it is harder. And these small choices, repeated over time, build something powerful: self-control, clarity, balance. And when you reach this level, something incredible happens. You stop being controlled by your desires and begin to have control over them. You stop being led by what you feel and start directing your life with intention. You stop living reactively and begin living intentionally. And this is the difference between an unstable life and a steady life. Because those who live based only on heart and flesh live oscillating, but those who learn to control live with direction. And perhaps this is the message you needed to hear today. Perhaps this is the alert you needed to realize that not everything that seems right truly is. That not everything you feel should be followed. That not everything your heart desires will lead you to where you really want to go. And if you want to live a more balanced, conscious, aligned life, it all begins with a simple but powerful decision. Don't automatically follow everything you feel, because in the end, the real danger is not out there in the world. It is within you, in the decisions you make every day. And if you want to continue growing, don't forget to follow the Sacred Truth channel. Turn on the bell and be part of this journey, because understanding this doesn't just change what you do. It completely changes who you become. And there is something even deeper that needs to be understood. Something many people completely ignore, but that defines the course of your entire spiritual life. The desires of the flesh and the inclinations of the heart don't just influence momentary decisions. They shape the kind of person you become over time. Every time you give in to an unfiltered impulse, every time you follow an emotion without questioning it, every time you make a decision based solely on what you feel in that moment, you are not just making an isolated choice. You are training your mind, strengthening a pattern, creating a version of yourself that gradually becomes more vulnerable to deception and less sensitive to truth. This process is silent, invisible, but extremely powerful because it happens every day, in small decisions that seem insignificant, but collectively shape an entire path. And the most dangerous part of all this is that this path rarely seems wrong at first. In fact, it often feels comfortable, natural, even justifiable, because the heart knows how to convince, how to create arguments, how to turn desires into needs, how to make you believe that what you want is what you need. And when you don't develop the ability to question this, you start living guided by an internal voice that is not always aligned with what is true, with what is right, with what will truly lead you to peace and stability. And this is where many people completely lose themselves, not because they are weak, not because they don't want to do right, but because they don't realize they are being guided by something that seems trustworthy, but is actually unstable. Because the heart changes. What you feel today may not be what you feel tomorrow. What seems right now may seem wrong later. And when you build your life based on something that constantly changes, the inevitable result is instability. You begin living in highs and lows, in contradictory decisions, in paths that start with conviction and end in regret. And this instability is exhausting. It wears you down. It confuses you, because the person begins to feel like they are always trying to get it right, but always ends up back in the same place. They start to realize that, despite following their feelings, they cannot find peace. And this happens because there is a profound difference between freedom and lack of direction. Many people believe that following the heart is freedom, but in reality, when there is no filter, no awareness, no self-control, that is not freedom. That is vulnerability. And emotional vulnerability is one of the greatest entry points for error, because when you don't control what you feel, any emotion can take you in any direction. A moment of anger can generate a decision you will regret. A moment of loneliness can make you accept things you shouldn't. Moment of desire can make you cross limits that were once clear to you. And all this happens quickly, with little time to think, because the desires of the flesh are like that. They don't wait. They push, they demand, they want an immediate response. And the more you respond to these impulses without resistance, the harder it becomes to resist in the future, because you are training your mind to give in. You are creating a behavioral pattern where impulse always wins and conscience always arrives too late. And this is extremely dangerous, because there comes a point when the person no longer questions, they just react. They no longer reflect, they just follow. They no longer analyze, they just feel. And living like this is living without direction. It is being carried away by internal and external circumstances. But there is a turning point, and it begins when you decide to interrupt this cycle. When you begin to realize that not everything you feel should be followed, when you understand that you need to develop control, when you accept that there is an internal battle and ignoring it only strengthens the wrong side. And this decision is not easy, because it goes against what is comfortable, against what is automatic, against what you are used to. But it is exactly why it is necessary, because true strength is not in doing what you want all the time. It is in knowing when not to do it. It is in recognizing an impulse and choosing not to act. It is in feeling something, and yet deciding based on something greater than that momentary feeling. And this requires maturity, discipline, awareness. But it also brings something that no desire of the flesh can offer: real peace. Because when you begin to live with this level of control, something changes profoundly inside you. Your mind becomes clearer because it is no longer being pulled in multiple directions at once. Your heart becomes more stable because it no longer depends on passing emotions. Your decisions become firmer because they are no longer based solely on what you feel at that moment. And this stability begins to reflect in every area of your life. You begin to realize that you have more control over your actions, more clarity about your paths, more confidence in your choices. And this doesn't mean you stop feeling. It doesn't mean you stop having desires. It doesn't mean you never face internal conflicts. It simply means that you stop being controlled by all of it. You take a different stance, a different posture, an authority over yourself that did not exist before. And this authority changes everything. Because now you do not react. You decide. You are not led. You direct. You are not dominated. You dominate. And this is true freedom. And perhaps the greatest transformation of all happens right here. When you realize that the greatest enemy is not outside, not in circumstances, not in people, but often within, the choices you make when no one is watching, the paths you follow when no one is influencing you, the decisions you make based solely on what you feel, and understanding. This is powerful because it places you in a position of responsibility. Not a heavy responsibility, but a conscious responsibility. You begin to realize that you have more control than you imagined, that you can change patterns, that you can build a new way of living. And this opens a new path, a path where you are not defined by your desires, but by your decisions. And when you begin living like this, everything changes. How you relate, how you face challenges, how you see life. You stop being an unstable, impulsive, reactive person and become someone steady, conscious, intentional. And this doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with a simple decision. Repeat it every day. Do not automatically follow everything you feel. Because in the end, the true danger is not the desires of the flesh or the heart itself. It is allowing them to control you without questioning. And when you learn to question, filter, choose, you stop living in deception and start living with truth. And this truth doesn't just change your life. It completely changes your destiny. And in the end, there is a truth that cannot be ignored. You will always have desires, always have emotions, always have internal conflicts, and this will never completely disappear. But what defines the course of your life is not what you feel. It is what you choose to do with what you feel. Because everyone faces this battle. Everyone deals with desires, impulses, and thoughts. But not everyone chooses the same path. And it is precisely in this choice that the difference lies between living in deception or living with awareness. Because when you begin to understand that not everything that comes from within you is trustworthy, you stop acting automatically, stop being led by impulses, and start living more firmly, consciously aligned. And this does not mean it will be easy. It does not mean you will never fail, but it means you gain direction, control, and clarity about who you want to be and where you want to go. And perhaps today is exactly the moment to make this decision, not an emotional decision, not a decision based on a fleeting impulse, but a conscious decision to not let the desires of the flesh and the deception of the heart control your life. Because in the end, the real danger was never outside. It was always in what you choose to follow inside yourself. And if this message spoke to you, don't forget to follow the Sacred Truth channel, turn on the bell, and continue on this journey of growth and awareness. Because when you learn to master what you feel, you begin to transform who you are